All right, we're going to be starting our little webinar with one of my favorite people and with Jessica. And we are in the month of May, the American Cheese Society American Cheese Month. And so we're going to be with Jessica Little with Sweetgrass Dairy today. And she's got some really fun things to talk about. Plus, we have an amazing array of cheeses today to be able to taste. So hopefully you got a chance to be able to do that. All right. So welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm so happy for the invitation to be here. So thank you. Thank you
You're
again, and I'm happy to share our stories in honor of American Cheese Month. The things that I would love for people to remember about Sweetgrass Dairy is that the things that make us so special are that we are family owned. We are making cheese from cows that are out on grass year round due to our unique weather and water opportunities, and that we are still trying to make everything, in an artisan manner. So everything by hand. As you can see, this is our farm, our predominant farm. This is called Green Hill Dairy. And to give you a brief little background, my dad is a fourth generation dairy farmer, and he grew up in Western New York and went to college at the University of Georgia. He played football, and after one winter down south, he said he would never go back. And in true fashion, he didn't. So he met my mom at school, and then they have dairy farms in Georgia ever since then. And they farmed in a very conventional manner, meaning cows in barns, being milked around the clock, which is very common in a conventional method because dairy farmers are paid on volume instead of quality. And so they were making quite a lot of money and producing a lot of milk, but it wasn't very sustainable for the long run because the average lifespan of a dairy cow in a conventional system is only 2 to 3 lactations before they just cannot keep up with the demands on them. And so that they go off to become your fast food hamburgers. And my mom loved these animals so much. They were working themselves to death. It's not as great for the environment because there's a big waste problem. And they really wanted to do something different. And in 1993, they decided to switch over to a New Zealand rotational grazing style dairy. And this was the farm that they wanted to build, was that these cows here out on grass, you can see there's a pivot system in the back and there are 0 barns. So what makes us so unique is that we can literally grow grass 365 days a year because you need the temperature at least 50 degrees to grow grass. And we have an average annual temperature of 67 degrees, and we have unlimited water from the Floridan aquifer. And we are able to keep these cows on grass eating, year round. They never need to go into barns because we don't get snow. And so this is the way that we grow our grass, as well as keep our cows cool in the summer, which is our biggest challenge. But as you can see with these pictures, almost all the cows are at least 50% Jerseys because we don't want those big Holstein cows that are going to be compacting the soil or, they need more feed. We want these Jerseys that handle the heat better, are a little bit more heat tolerant, and can eat all this grass. So my parents started over in 1993 with this style farm, and the milk was so different that my mom particularly really wanted to show people the difference. So out of all of the different dairy products, milk, butter, yogurt, ice cream, cheese was by far the most scientific and artistic process that she came across. And she would wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh my gosh, I want to try to make Gouda. And she would make Gouda. And then it was so exciting when that turned out. There you go. And here's some of in our creamery here with those curds and those wheels. And that's Bernardo. He's been making cheese with us for almost 7 years now, who we're so thankful for. And but the milk was so different. It had this really different flavor profile that was really grassy and earthy, and the higher butterfat content from the Jersey cows. And so cheese was just a really good vehicle to show off and tell the story of rotational grazing and sustainable agriculture and humane animal husbandry. So we started making cheese in 2000. You can go to that next slide. And we learned how to make cheese. My husband Jeremy is a cheesemaker, and he learned how to make cheese from a French cheesemaker named Jean-Marc, and he was from the Pyrenees mountain region of France. So the very first style that we learned how to make was a Tomme, or farmhouse style. And after that, almost all of our recipes have been very French in style. So we make this green hill, you can see on the screen here, that is in a double cream cow's milk style with this white bloomy rind. So in the same family as a camembert or a brie, not necessarily either one of those things. It's its own kind of unique cheese. I don't necessarily think that we invent anything. We just kind of discover vehicles of being able to show off our milk. And Green Hill was a way to do that, to show off that really rich Jersey cow's milk. And then we have progressed and made other cheeses, again, in that very old world style. And just wanted to, at the end of the day, Jeremy will say that his goal as a cheesemaker, after my parents have worked so hard to make the highest quality milk, it's his job to just not mess it up. So he really wants to make cheeses that the true flavors of the grass and the earth really just shine through, and that you can taste it no matter what style you have.
You know, I did a seminar in Jacksonville with this particular cheese, and it got postponed. So the cheese was running a little longer in time-wise than typically we plan on. It wasn't expired, but it was right at that edge. And I have to say that this cheese got so gooey and rich, and everybody was just blown away by that. So this is a lot of ability from being a little chalky starting out to creamy to overall really gooey. The rind has got a beautiful button mushroom smell to it. You can smell the butter in the paste. It's just a magnificent little bloomy rind, and I really adore it. You look at what you can put with this, and this is one of the cheeses that stand on their own, that you want to just savor and enjoy. And a lot of times people are afraid of, well, I bring out the brie, now I'm bringing out the holidays, I'm bringing out the thing that is really special. They're all special. They all need to come out all the time, not just for a special occasion.
Sure. Well, I would agree with you. As far as out of all of our cheeses, we sell more Green Hill than anything else. Green Hill is named after my parents' first New Zealand rotational style dairy, and now they have 3. So we are able to farm, get milk from 3 different farms, and depending on what lactation cycle we want to pull the milk from to make cheese, which is really advantageous as cheesemakers, because it's very difficult to make consistent cheese with very early lactation and late lactation milk. So we like the flexibility of being able to pull from whichever farm that we like. But we wanted to make a cheese that, again, our biggest challenge of being in South Georgia is the heat. And so we live right on top of an aquifer, so we cannot, build down into the ground. Actually, here in Thomasville, no one has basements or anything like that, so we couldn't really put caves in under the ground. So it costs a lot of money to run coolers, and we really wanted to show off, again, that rich, buttery, Jersey-based milk, and Green Hill was a really good vehicle for that. I have a very special place in my heart for Green Hill because we sell more of it than anything else, and it's named after my parents' flagship dairy. But I also, Michael, as you mentioned, I like how it changes, just soft ripened cheeses in general. I guess all cheeses develop as they age, but I like that you can see it, with soft ripened cheeses, they do start so firm, almost like cutting butter, cold butter, and then they ripen over time, that breakdown there underneath the rind, that proteolysis and lipolysis to give you different flavor profiles throughout the time period. But I really love Green Hill because it has so many different flavors. You know, it's very complex in that, as you know, there's so much flavor in the fat. And so with this much fat, you get a sweetness, you know, from the milk, but then you also get this, you know, when you acidify milk to make cheese, there's a slight soured note to it, like creme fraiche or something in there. And then the rind with that Penicillium candidum, it provides a slight bitterness to it. And then when you have higher fat content, you typically need to add a little bit more salt to help balance that, or else it's not super, or it could be over bitter. So you get a saltiness from a double cream cheese, and then there's just so much umami at the end of the day. So Green Hill to me is really fun because there's so much going on, even for a young pasteurized cheese. There's a lot of complexity, and we've done different with different restaurants and winemakers over the years, and I've seen a very wide range of wines and beers that pair with Green Hill, which is really fun. You would think that it would just be like a Chardonnay or a champagne, but there's been some really cool out of the box pairings. What do you pair beer wise with the Green Hill?
Well, at this exact second, I have a Irish Red. This is a local brewery. This is 81 Bay out here in Tampa. And red ales work really well across the board. Matter of fact, they'll work with everything here. They react very differently with each one, but there's a lot of maltiness to this particular beer, to a red. And so there's a little bit of hoppiness, but it's really minor in the big scheme of things, where you really want that maltiness. So it started off with a little bit of tanginess, and then I added in the beer, and you really pick up more of the butter. The mushroom kind of drops down a little bit, but you really get this intense buttery flavor with the beer. So you get butter and malt, and maybe even a little molasses that comes through. So it's really quite interesting to have those two together.
Nice. Do you think it makes the beer any better, or does the beer just enhance the cheese?
I think it does both. I think you get, with the beer, like I said, it had a little bit of hoppiness in it. And so with the cheese, it kind of takes out that hoppiness and brings that malt up. So you get more malt, you get more butter, you get more molasses. You get all these little things that kind of come in and accent the flavors when you're working with that.
Nice. I always enjoy talking to you about beer pairings because you know so much about beer and cheese.
I drink a lot of beer, so and I eat a lot of cheese, so you know that kind of helps, you know, when working with that.
Nice, nice. Well, good. Yes, that's Green Hill. Again, it's our I try to stay away from saying our flagship cheese, but it is the one that most people know us for. It's the one that really helped put us on the map as far as in the artisan cheese world, and the one that I think we make the most consistently. You know, as cheesemakers, we struggle so much trying to make a consistent product with very inconsistent raw materials, and so it has been really hard to make this cheese consistently every single day with changing seasonality and lactation cycles and, you know, different staff members and that sort of thing. So it's been hard, but we're trying to figure it out. And then we're moving right on to Thomasville Tomme. So Thomasville Tomme is an uncooked, unpressed, natural rind, aged cow's milk cheese. So again, this was the first cheese that we ever learned how to make from a French cheesemaker from the Pyrenees Mountains. And like you said earlier, Michael, to me, it's a good gateway cheese into artisan cheeses because it's not too strong. But Liz Thorpe said it really well one time, and she said, I really appreciate it. She was like, although it's very mild, it is not lacking in flavor. So there is a complexity to Thomasville Tomme, and I find that most sommeliers tend to really like this cheese. I think it's because it's got a lot of subtle layers of flavors. And again, our goal is always to let the natural flavors of the milk shine through. So we want you to be able to taste that grassiness. And probably the best story that I can reiterate this is when I was in college, before I even moved back to the farm, I was working in a cheese shop in Atlanta just to learn more about cheeses and understand, you know, our industry. And I was helping at the counter and a customer, and there were a couple of coworkers behind me that were unpacking boxes and unpacking different cheeses. And I was standing there talking to a customer, and then all of a sudden I smelled the pastures from home. I smelled the farm, and I turned around and I was like, oh my gosh. And they had just opened a box from Sweetgrass Dairy. It was our cheeses. And I get a lot of that in our Thomasville Tomme, of just that grassiness of the pasture. So this cheese, like I said, is not, it is very mild, and we find that you can use it in such a wide range of applications. We melt it in just about any recipe that you can think of, because unlike cheddar, it doesn't separate and get oily. It really has a very soft melt, and it goes really well in everything from, I mean, my children make quesadillas and, you know, tacos and grilled cheese sandwiches with Thomasville Tomme, but really, really, really versatile. And again, going back to different wine and cheese pairings, I've seen anything from, you know, Chiantis and a lot of Pinot Noirs, and then a lot of unoaked Chardonnays and Viogniers, all really, really delicious with Thomasville Tomme.
Well, I have to say the red still works really well with this. What's interesting is that you can really taste some saltiness in here. And you have a wonderful butter. You know, the butter on here is just incredible. And again, you can smell the fields. You can smell the earthiness on this rind, which, you know, growing up in Iowa was, you know, in the fields and all that. That's just, like you said, at the shop, as soon as you open it up, you can smell that. And it's just a wonderful earthiness that just prevails. And then the butter, and then there's some tang. And like I said, there was a little bit of saltiness to it, but with the beer, you know, a little saltiness on the beer really brings up that maltiness again. So you get that nice malt, the sweetness, the butter here. So, you know, one of my favorites is, you know, putting these two together, having a nice red. You know, a black lager would work really well, you know, but, you know, this is such a lovely cheese to have, to bring to your friends, to any occasion, just even having it for snacking. You know, when I get done with this cheese board comes out and we get to sit and graze tonight. I actually believe that this is going to be my dinner tonight. So,
Nice.
and it's a magnificent dinner.
Nice. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's Thomasville Tomme is named after our hometown. So Thomasville, a lot of people don't know where Thomasville is because it's a very small town. We have 50,000 people in our whole county. But the way I best describe it to people when I'm traveling around the country and talking about cheese is that we're almost exactly halfway between Atlanta and Orlando. So we're 4 hours north of Orlando and about 4 hours south of Atlanta. So in the southwest part of the state. And Thomasville is our hometown. So the Thomasville Tomme is an homage to our hometown.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so like I said, it's the first cheese that Jeremy ever learned how to make. And sometimes, you know, I don't know if you've heard this a lot. You were also in the restaurant industry, but a lot of chefs will say that the hardest technique to learn as a chef is restraint. And I think Thomasville Tomme is a good example of Jeremy really trying to learn that his biggest skill set is, you know, the biggest technique that he could get to the cheeses is actually restraint, just not overworking them, and let the milk really speak for itself.
Absolutely. All right.
And then I think that's a good segue. I'd love to, if it's okay with you, Michael, to kind of start talking about the pimento cheese, actually, since we use Thomasville Tomme in that recipe. You know, if you grew up in the South, like myself. I didn't have a really great love affair with pimento cheese because I was just used to my grandmother making these really bad little tea sandwiches after church or after school. And it was this bland kind of mayonnaise-y spread that didn't really taste that great. And we opened a cheese shop in downtown Thomasville in 2010, and we wanted some different spreads or dips that we could put out. We had 3 little tables in the back where people could sit down, have a glass of wine or a beer with some cheeses. And somebody said, we really should make our own pimento cheese. And Jeremy, who's actually from Ohio, he's not from the South, was not raised in the South, thought, gosh, if I'm going to make pimento cheese, I want to make the absolute best pimento cheese that I can. So he said, we're going to make it with Thomasville Tomme, which is, raw milk cheese. This is the only raw milk pimento cheese that we know of on the market. And we're going to use really great mayonnaise, and we're going to use piquillo peppers and pimentone from Spain, a little bit of Dijon mustard. So we have a little bit of a kick to it with some of that smokiness from the pimentone. And the pimento cheese we just made in the cheese shop for several years. And then on a dare, I dared Jeremy to enter the pimento cheese into the ACS competition. And I can't remember if it was 2016. I believe it was 2016. I'm not sure. But I was just like, just put it in the competition in the flavored spreads and just see what happens. And we were so shocked that year. It got a 99 out of 100. So we were like, we might be onto something here with this pimento cheese. And so we have since, started selling it into different retailers. But it's really fun for me to take it on the road anytime I go on a sales trip or anything, and I taste with a chef, and they always think, gosh, pimento cheese is so pedestrian. And it is, but it also can be really high quality, and it also is the cheese of the South. We do not have a long history of cheese making in the South before refrigeration, and this is the way that Southerners ate cheese. So I'm quite fond of our pimento cheese. We've been making it now for 10 years, and I eat it all the time. I'm not sick of it one bit. We sell it. The cheese shop now has turned into a full service restaurant. And our number one selling item is a pimento cheese bourbon bacon jam burger. That is like a nap on a plate, but it is so delicious and lends itself really well, like our pimento cheese and grilled cheese sandwiches, on burgers, as a spread. I mean, I don't know. How about you? Do you eat a lot of pimento cheese, Michael?
I have a couple that I kind of play around with. I make my own, and I'm just whatever cheeses that I happen to have that would be appropriate is basically how I make it myself, being that it's a relatively simple recipe. So most often it's just something that I would whip up, kind of like, a grilled cheese sandwich or something like that. Whatever happens to be around is going to be there. And but honestly, the spiciness to this is right on the perfect edge, because I still taste a little bit of that, but it's not overbearing. It's got a little bit of sweetness with that just little bit of mayonnaise. Then of course the Thomasville Tomme in there is exceptional. And what I think is amazing is that on a lot of these you run into that fact that it's all blended together, and you can really see the chunks of cheese in this and how thick that is. Yeah. By the way, I'm using the brewer's crackers. This is actually made out of spent grain from making beer. So, kind of the whole circle there, being able to do that. But, I want something that's going to stand up to the pimento cheese. And I also, I don't want it breaking when I'm dipping it in there.
Well, good. Yeah, it's to me, I think pimento cheese is such a good party cheese. It's good in group whenever we can all get back together and socialize. It's a fun one. And at least in my experience when we've done some different dinners, one time I never think of offering this cheese when we do these different dinners with sommeliers and winemakers. And there was a winemaker that was like, you know what, I want to work with pimento cheese. And we were at Sea Island, which is, you know, really fancy resort, and here in Georgia. And they asked for a pairing that was a Mayacamas Cabernet Sauvignon. So a really, really high-end Cabernet with the pimento cheese. And it was so fun, that juxtaposition between this like really high-end Napa cab and this very pedestrian, very beloved Southern ingredient that a lot of the other country, parts of the country really are just now turning on to pimento cheese. It was really fun. So I have since changed my mind on whether or not pimento cheese is a good wine pairing option. It really brings out kind of that smokiness and meatiness in wine. So it's pretty fun.
I have a friend in Seattle, and one of her, I guess, indulgences is champagne and crispy French fries. So, sometimes doesn't have to be, the equivalent of a filet mignon or something really crazy. Sometimes just these simple pleasures work really well.
Absolutely. Those comfort foods. I agree. For sure. Well, I'm going to jump to Asher Blue since you hinted at it earlier. And I love telling the story of Asher Blue because I very much believe that every cheesemaker or every winemaker or every beer maker, they all tasted a cheese, a wine, a beer that changed their lives, that inspired them to learn more and to dive deeper into that world of cheeses, wines, beers, whatever. And for Jeremy, it was blue cheese. He tasted Roquefort for the first time and just thought, oh my gosh, I love this Roquefort. It's so delicious. What is this unique blue flavor profile? And so when we started making cheese, we did not have a blue, and people cautioned us and said, whatever you do, don't make blue. It's so difficult. You're balancing culture and mold. It's so finicky. It needs the right, aging environment. And we are hard-headed enough. And I also encourage Jeremy, I was like, if you're going to make cheese, make things that you love, because people will see that. It's very transparent. And so he kept working on blue for years and years. And Asher Blue, I think we first started making it in maybe 2004, 2005. And it's named after our second son, who was born in 2004. And he wanted to make a raw milk, natural rind, non-homogenized blue, which is so hard to do. It's maybe one of the most difficult styles of blue to make. And he really liked that creamy, crumbly texture. So it's not that we don't like homogenized blues. We actually really love them. So thinking of like Gorgonzola or something with that really fudgy texture. We like the creamy, crumbly. We also did not have the homogenizer at the farm. So it just made it easier to decide to make this style. But again, I think that blue cheese lends itself so well to our flavor profile. So unlike some other blue cheeses, like one of my other absolute favorite blue cheeses is Point Reyes Bay Blue. I think it has some really great sweet notes to it. The Asher, I believe, is a little bit more savory in comparison. You get more of that like mushroomy components like you were talking about earlier, and grassy, earthy. And sometimes I really do get on the finish some notes of cocoa, but it really, really, I think, shows off our very unique grass-based milk really, really well. And it's also, like I said, a cheese that is very, very close to our hearts, that we genuinely love making, and it tells our story really well.
Blues, as a judge at the International Cheese Awards and all that, blues is one of my categories that I get to judge in, and I really adore them. And what's really funny is that when you start talking to people about blue, you get that comment, it's, oh, I tried blue and I found it to be whatever, blah, blah, too strong and all that. And I tell them, it's like going into the grocery store and walking into the produce department and picking up a vegetable and taking a bite and saying, I don't like vegetables. But you only tried that one. Well, they're all vegetables, So blues are so radically different, from the creamy gorgonzolas all the way up through the different styles. And I think that, where you guys are is that this is a really easy to eat, well balanced blue. There isn't this screaming tanginess or saltiness to it. It has a really nice balance of flavors. There's butter, there's mushroom, there's a nice earthiness to it. And I agree that, with Bay Blue, they're very similar. Bailey Hazen, I think, is very, very close. Is the same area, more earthy than they are that blue, tangy, salty stuff. And this has really got a lot of depth to it. And it's just also the bluing in here is just so beautiful. When you look at cheeses a lot of times, to be able to get that quality of the bluing in here, it's not all in one spot, it's all over, it's nice and balanced, and it's just a beautiful cheese overall. And, the first thing that I like about it is, pairing with it would be honey, of course, and, Savannah bee honey in Georgia, does a fabulous job. Some of the highest quality honey that you can get. It's just amazing. And just a little bit of sweetness on here. And then, of course, with the red ale, you're still going to get all that maltiness in there. Now, a lot of people are afraid of the rind. So what do you say about the rind here?
So that's a really great question. And, one of my most eye-opening experiences is when we have had European cheesemakers that have travel to the United States and they come to the farm, and we do a cheese tasting at the end, it's always the most nerve-wracking time, because here you've got these French cheesemakers that are, incredible. They've been making cheese for generations or whatever, and they're tasting your cheese, and we've been making it for less than 20 years. And you think, oh my gosh, there's no way we're going to compare. And, I'm holding my breath, and they'll get a piece of cheese and they'll smell the rind first, and they'll feel it, and they'll smell the other side. And the first bite that they take or that I've seen is from the rind on the outside. As they said, you can get so much of that microflora. Cheeses are living things, and these rinds on the outside there's a lot of flavor in there. But as Americans, we always eat from, I think, the inside out, which is completely fine. I am of the school of thought that cheese is meant to bring joy and flavor, and however you want to enjoy it is the absolute right way. So those people that really like to eat the rind on breeze, then knock yourself out. And if you don't, then scoop it out and enjoy it in the best way that you can. So it is completely edible, though. We do not use any sort of wax or plastic or anything like that.
It is just, the earthiness on this is so pleasant. It's kind of like a portobello mushroom. It's got some earthiness to it. It's got some sweetness to it. A lot of times you're right about people going to the center, but what most people think about is that the center is going to be the creamiest. It's going to be the most buttery. So starting off with that, it has a tendency to dry out or get a little bit more earthy as you get closer to the rind. But, this has got such a nice balance, whether you're eating it from the center or whether you're eating it from the end. It's such a beautiful and easy to eat cheese. And I think that a lot of people that are maybe afraid of a blue, this would be a good way to be able to start it. And, I guess my question would be is, if you really like mushrooms, that earthiness of mushrooms that you get out of there, I think that this would be really what direction you're to go. And then you get the butter, and then you get a little bit of saltiness. So sauteed mushrooms,
Right.
roasted mushrooms.
Yes. And so people have asked me, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense would you classify Asher Blue? And it, to me, it looks a lot more intense than it actually is. It's usually, in my opinion, around a 4 or 5 in intensity. It's not like a cabrales or anything that's going to be really funky and with that really pungent bite to it. I do think that you're right. We definitely, it does have some bluing, but we want to see a lot of the yellow of the paste of the cheese. And I think a good note here to make is that cows process beta carotene from the grass in a way that you can see the yellow in the cheese. So all of our cheeses are going to be more of a yellow color due to the beta carotene in the grass that the cows are eating, versus if we were to feed our cows silage or grain in a barn. So you can see that really bright yellow. Michael, would you also agree that Asher Blue is more in that 4 to 5 out of a scale of 10 range on strong flavors?
You know, when you start trying to classify cheeses like that, everybody's palate is a little different. Sensitivity. I mean, some people find Brussels sprouts to be too strong. You know, so it really depends. You know, using that that kind of gauge, and that's what I was kind of saying about the mushrooms. You know, that kind of earthiness in there. You know, and they kind of bring out some strength to them. But by no means is this a strong or an overpowering blue. As a matter of fact, the aroma on here is very similar to the Thomasville Tomme, that has that wonderful earthiness to it. There's no stink, no strong smell. It has a nice, really pleasant earthiness. And so, yeah, I guess all coming around, it would be right in the middle there. It's not mild, it's not strong, so it would be right in the middle of the blue world. And
well, good. Yes, and my funny story about Asher is that, like I mentioned to you earlier, that it is named after our second son, whose name is Asher. He is now 15 and working a lot on the farm because he needs to stay busy. But he is one of 4 boys. We have 4 boys. He's the second. And we've made cheeses named after our first son and our third son as well. We're working on a cheese to name after our 4th son right now. But the one that is the most popular of the cheeses that are named after the kids is Asher. And so we will go to a restaurant somewhere and they'll have Asher Blue on the menu, and he loves to tease his brothers that he is way more popular than they are because his cheese has been more popular than the other ones. So maybe that's just some brotherly love there.
well, you know, when we talk about the different pairings, Bernard Kitchen, which is also Georgia, they do a lot of gingers. And this is actually a ginger syrup. And, you know, I was really curious because I really love ginger. And so I thought, you know, this might be really fun. It's amazing. You know, not something that I would, you know, I would think of the first time, but I thought about, you know, that ginger is such a great root. It has such real flavor, having a little bit of sweetness, you know, like the Savannah honey, which they have in honey and cheese or other versions of that. I even have a honeycomb on here. But, oh man, that's just really incredible having something like a ginger syrup on it. So that makes it fun too.
I'm sure. And I remember we've done a pairing in the past with some other cheesemakers that you selected. And it was, I think, fresh Chev from Cypress Grove with that ginger syrup and like a lemon shortbread cookie or something. And it was amazing altogether. So that's a really cool company from Georgia.
Yeah.
So, well, I will say, Michael, will you put the slide up about the different grass varieties that we have? And I would just love to circle back a little bit in talking about our farming method a little bit, because I think that we can taste it in the cheeses but I really wanted to make sure that people saw, right, yep, that one, what makes Sweetgrass Dairy so unique as compared to other cheesemakers around the country. And I am a firm believer that you are able to make wonderful cheeses all around the country, and we actually have some really, really great friends in the cheese world. Jeremy has spent quite a bit of time up at Jasper Hill with Mateo. We were having a really hard time making blue cheese, and so he went to and we had some issues with the Green Hill, and Mateo has been an incredible resource and helping us work through some of our issues. But I really believe that what makes us unique with our milk is the way that we farm. And a lot of questions that I get is, is rotational grazing a monoculture of cropping, a monocrop where, we don't have a lot of diversity? But you can see here with this slide that we actually have a minimum of 4 different grass varietals in the warm season and the cool season. So we plant roughly, it depends on the weather, somewhere between April and May for the summer grasses, and then again in October or so for our cool season grasses. And we are able to grow grass basically year round this way. There is a little short patch of time in between both of those seasons where the grass is still growing in. But I think the best way to measure this, what I've seen in a lot of different articles is that, is dairy farming bad for the earth? Is dairy farming ruining the atmosphere with all this methane production? And I really genuinely believe that a lot of factory farms are terrible for the environment, whether they're for pigs, chickens, cows. But by grazing in this method, it's actually regenerative. We are healing the earth. And the way that we are looking at it, my dad will say that he is more of a dirt farmer than a dairy farmer. And it is his job to create and help foster the most healthy, alive, and biodiverse soils that he possibly can, because then the grass is going to be really healthy, and then the cows are going to be really healthy in turn. So he will not have to do very much with the cows if he can keep this soil really healthy. And a good way to measure soil health is through organic matter. And a good way to look at that is when the European settlers came over to this area, the organic matter was probably, they have estimated, somewhere between 2 and 3%. And organic matter means how much nutrients can you hold in that soil, how much water can you hold in there, and how much carbon can you sequester out of the atmosphere back into the soil. And after many many decades now of factory industrial farming, where these companies would come in and just kill the soil and start over and just pour a bunch of industrial fertilizers and stuff to grow. And these vegetables, they're like so beautiful in the grocery store, but they have no flavor at all. And so you can drop most of the factory farms around here that have been growing vegetables or cotton or whatever, have less than 1% organic matter, meaning that there is just really nothing in the soil, no way to capture that carbon back into the soil. But over the years, since we've been doing this since 1993, we have had a partnership with the University of Georgia, where they've done a lot of scientific studies, and we are growing. We're able to gain about 1/3 of a point of organic matter per year, and we're now over 7% organic matter at Green Hill Dairy. And for us, that means that we are getting carbon back into the soil, which helps reduce global warming, which gets all of these nutrients and all this biodiversity back in there, which in turn gives us the complexity of the milk flavors, which makes our cheese more flavorful. So when we have submitted cheeses into different competitions, and we will get the results back, and we'll look and be able to trace the milk back to whichever farm, most of the time it actually comes from Green Hill Dairy, the dairy that was started in 1993, the oldest one, that has the most biodiversity in the soil, that has the most organic matter. So I grew up on the dairy farm, and just watching this transition, I genuinely believe that how we are farming is making a difference, not only for these cows' lives, not only for my parents and the farm, their teams' lives, for sustainability, but also for the earth in the long term. They are really healing the soil that was not healthy before, and it is the farming I think that we need to be thinking about in the future as we continue to have all of this global warming issues.
All right, are we gonna taste Griffin?
Yeah, let's taste some Griffin. Let's get back there.
All right.
My own little tangent there. All right, so Griffin is a cheese that is our newest cheese. We launched it, I guess, in 2017. So we've been working on this recipe. For us, it usually takes about 2 years minimum to develop a cheese. There you go. And Griffin is named after our third son. His nickname is Finn. And we wanted to make a cheese that had a little bit firmer texture, that had something a little bit more like cheddar, but without having to make a cheddar process. And we wanted to do something to the cheese that would add a flavor component that was complementary to the grass, but that just something that was really unique. And what we came up with is this process of a uncooked but pressed cheese where the curds are washed in beer. So Griffin, the cheese making process starts its life very similarly to the Thomasville Tomme, and except for we are building acidity a little bit faster, and we cut the curds a lot smaller so that we expel more whey. And then after we separate the curds in the whey, the curds was a lot drier than the Thomasville Tomme where we're trying to trap in more moisture. We pour in a whole keg of Terminus Porter, which is a porter, a Baltic porter style, made at Gate City Brewing in Roswell, Georgia, so just north of Atlanta. And we were looking for a porter style that was made year-round that had those really great malty notes of coffee and chocolate that were more rich. So I think this was a really fun process for Jeremy because he was trying all of these different beers, and we found that IPAs, as you can imagine, were way too bitter, bringing out bitter notes of the cheese. But the porters and stouts really complemented that grassiness, and so we pour a whole keg of beer in there, let the curds swim around for a while, and then drain the beer off. And then this cheese actually is pressed all together, so it has a very close texture, as you can see. And then the outside of the rind we wash actually twice with beer throughout its lifespan. So the Thomasville Tomme, we will launch, or we will usually release it from the farm somewhere between 60 and say 120 days is the hard target. And the Griffin, we will not even release until 120 days. We want to age it a little bit longer. We want it to have a little bit more flavor development and a little bit more sharpness. But it's been interesting seeing, like, geographically, we find that this cheese does really well on the West Coast, where I think people are used to drinking more hoppy style beers or stronger flavor profiles, because it does have an inherent little slight bitterness to it. But it's been a fun cheese because we've never made one quite with this cheddar-like texture, and really trying to enhance. So I think up front you get a little bit more of the beer, and then you get more of that grassiness kind of on the finish. What would you say?
There's a burnt maple that's in here. That's very pleasant. It's not a bad burn. It's a caramelized maple that is really striking. That's so different than the Thomasville Tomme. I mean, radically different. I would say that it's kind of like an aged Gouda without the caramel. It's got that really rich maple flavor. It's rind. It's got a beautiful smell to it. It's a little stronger than earthy, but you got some of that beer yeast that's in there. Gives it a really nice flavor. As a brewer, when you're boiling your wort, you get this really great maple flavor throughout the brewery, and that's what you really get here, is that maple richness to it. There's a little bit of tanginess, a little bit of salt, but you know, this doesn't fit in any traditional category. In other words, if you're saying, well, it's kind of like, tastes like a Gouda, but it's like kind of like a cheddar, but it's also like a farmstead. It's really branches out there. I don't really see a pigeonhole for it. I think it's just something that people that want a little bit more of a robust cheese without being strong, you know, having that caramelized maple is very, very pleasant. It's not sweet. There's a little bit of acidity on it, so it's balanced very, very well. With the red ale, with the maple, yeah, this is definitely a good beer cheese. And you can do an IPA with this. I think that what would happen is that depending on how hoppy, like if you're Centennial or Cascade hops with that pininess in there, I think it would neutralize it and really give a nice balance, give you a little bit more of the grain out of the IPA and less of the hoppiness, because this has got a lot of power to it.
Yes. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head for us. We've really struggled. If you know, we've talked about potentially entering this cheese into different competitions, but we don't know where to put it. It's, you know, it's, if you put it in a flavored category, it's not strong enough to really say that it's flavored. But then if you put it in a regular category, there's definitely a flavor to it. So it really doesn't have quite a home. We did win a Good Food Award for it, which, you know, is our practices and you know, all what goes into making the cheese, which we're so proud of. But it is a very difficult cheese to kind of pigeonhole and figure out exactly where to put it. Again, cheese has been around for so many thousands of years that I don't believe that anybody invents anything. I think we, you know, more or less discover along the way. And this was a really fun project. And it's actually my favorite day that they're making cheese in the cheese plant. You walk in and it smells like a mochaccino. Or like a mocha. It just smells so good. As those warm cheese curds and beer and all of that going on. It's great.
But, you know, with the selection of cheeses, the diversity here is magnificent. You know, the Thomasville Tomme in its lightness, and the Griffin in its intensity, the blue being earthy. But you know what comes out in all of these, and every single time I taste this, I got the earth and grassiness and the butter. You know, you really taste that out of here. And when you said that about vegetables, about a lot of times they're being bland and they don't have that depth, you know, sometimes cheeses taste good, but they don't have any depth. But this has got a lot of depth to it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I guess Jeremy's mission is successful with these cheeses at least. We'll keep them around for now. Now, out of curiosity, what is the difference between a black lager and a regular lager?
A black lager has darker grains in it, so it's going to give you a little more maltiness. It's not going to be, a lager is very, very clean. It's got more effervescence. It's got a little bit of grain in it, so it gives you a really light flavor. Making a dark lager or a Schwarzbier is adding in some maltiness to it. So it's right on that edge of going to like a porter or a stout, but they have that bitterness element where when you stay in a black lager, you get a little bit of sweetness in it, and but not too sweet. It still has the crispness of a lager with a little bit of maltiness to it. One of my favorite beers, I'm very fortunate that 610 Brewing and I collaborated on it, and they're kind enough to, during this time period where getting beer can be a challenge, they were kind enough to let me have a keg.
Nice. Nice. I would imagine that with that description that a black lager probably is very versatile with a wide range of cheeses. Then you can probably pair it with almost everything.
It is true. And, you know, as somebody that's in cheese and also in brewing, the design and concept was to be able to do that. The second beer that we worked is the mischievous red. And like a Irish red, it has that maltiness, and the maltiness goes across the board. You know, it's not going to be life changing. You know, like you find this particular beer that, you know, is the best beer you've had. You got to tell everybody about it. A lot of times, you know, they may or may not work. Whereas a black lager, a red ale, you know, they work across the board. You know, they're not going to send you out to the best thing you have ever had, but at the same time, it's going to give you a really nice balance. You know, you think about a lot of people that sit down and go to dinner, and, you know, they get a drink for dinner, and they hope that that drink goes with everything that they had. And, you know, a lot of times a red, a black lager pretty much goes along with everything you go around the cheese world. I wouldn't say it's so universal you could do anything with it. You know, I can find cheeses that will knock your socks off regardless of what beer that you choose. But even with wines, you know, where do you go? I mean, what's your go-to wine?
Gosh. I would say probably if I want to pair it with a wide range of cheeses, I'm probably going to go with more unoaked or neutral oaked Chardonnay or something like that, like from Macon. I do love, actually what I'm drinking today is a Verdicchio from Kermit Lynch. I like the slight bitterness on a Verdicchio, and kind of the salinity kind of brings it out. So not a lot of oak, but can go well with a wide range of cheeses. And I do see we have a question here. Somebody wanted to know if we're going to experiment with any other flavored cheeses. And we do make a cheese that they mentioned called Heat, and thank you. And the Heat is our version of a pepper jack. Again, the same kind of thought process that Jeremy did behind the pimento cheeses. He goes, you know, we had some guys in the cheese room that were part of the cheese team that were all begging for a pepper jack. And he said, well, if I'm going to make a pepper jack, it's going to be the best that I could possibly make. So he sources these incredible, all organic, 5 different types of peppers with some cilantro and garlic. It is really delicious. And when I was pregnant with our youngest son, I think I craved Heat more than anything else. It makes incredible nachos, and I probably eat it around, you know, in football season more so than anything else. We don't make a lot of it, maybe only a couple times a year. And I don't know, the short answer to that is I don't know. Maybe. I would never rule out anything. We're in the process of building a new production facility right now that we're supposed to be in August. And hopefully it'll be a short delay, but it's really exciting. Our Cloget equipment from France arrived yesterday. So it is, you know, happening, and Jeremy is so excited to get in there. We've been bursting at the seams and unable to really experiment and add any new cheeses to our lineup because we've had a really wonderful problem of having so much demand for fewer cheeses. So he is excited to get in there and experiment. The one cheese that he has been working on for a while is almost a reblochon style, so more of a wash rind, named after our youngest child because he's pretty stinky in the best possible ways. And so I know that's the first one, but it truly does take years to make a cheese. And then I think it's no different than like the Asher Blue. I always kind of joke with him that that's going to be his lifetime project, you know, to continue to make Asher and develop it and see how it turns out. You know, as it continues to get better and better and our microflora get better and see what we learn. So I wouldn't rule it out. The answer is I don't know, but I wouldn't rule it out. You never know what Jeremy's got up his sleeve.
You know, it's funny, yesterday when we were setting up and all that, we were talking about, you know, being off the road and, you know, both of us, you know, we between the trade shows and everything that we do around the country, we're always running off. And I mean, even in the last year, you got out to, or in the spring, you got out to Cayman, didn't you?
I did. It was so fun.
Yeah, you know, so the Cayman Cookout, you know, that's just one of my favorites to be able to go and play. And the chefs are so much fun. And of course, you had the Georgia contingent as well, you know, and so that was good. But, you know, being now that you're settled in on the farm, you know, it's got to be just wonderful to be at home and being in a normal routine of, you know, the farm life.
Well, I wouldn't say that anything lately has been normal per se, but it has been nice to not be in and out of airports, and I do love telling our story and meeting people all along the way, and um, we live in such a remote area that it's not like we have a bunch of tourists. Like one of my best friends in the cheese world is Lynn from Point Reyes, and they're only an hour outside of San Francisco. So they have, chefs and buyers and, other cheesemakers up there all the time. And we are so far off the beaten path that that doesn't happen. So, I do miss seeing everyone's faces. I would say that every training, you and I have done a lot of IDFs together. I would always leave those feeling so inspired and bring back, ideas and, just sitting at a table with other cheesemakers and what their struggles were and us working out things. I think there's a lot of value in collaboration and just innovation that comes from those times. So I do miss seeing everyone face to face, but luckily with technology like this, we've been able to connect. And I'm sure that what I told Jeremy the other day is that, it seems like musicians or artists in general, out of very painful experiences of breakups or whatever, there's usually incredible art that is created from that, whether it's music or paintings or whatever, that maybe through all of this hardship of the last couple of months, and who knows how long it's going to be, there'll be some incredible cheeses that people are going to feel so inspired and their stories to tell now that we're stuck on our farms and in their creameries making cheese. So we'll see what happens.
I've been very fortunate as, getting everybody set up for these 12 webinars coming up and talking with everybody and the challenges that they're experiencing, but also the amount that they're able to give back at this point. That a lot of things that cheesemakers can share and working with the public and with restaurants and getting everybody up and going. And I have to say how much I love and adore you guys, and I miss seeing you all the time. And it's really funny that when you said about Lynn and when I was putting together some panels with you two, and I never realized how close friends you were and having you up there, but you always got the best reviews from everybody because you two are such great friends.
Yeah, well, we have a really wonderful industry where I don't think it's very competitive. I think we all want to see each other succeed. And so I think there's strength in numbers. So we're really fortunate for that. But I definitely miss seeing you too. I think we should go ahead and schedule another webinar a year from now so we can be talking about all of our new cheeses that have come out of this rough time. So just go ahead and pencil me in.
Well, I was just thinking, I think maybe we should have you and Lynn on and we could do something together, the three of us.
I would love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, reach out to her. Tell her that we want to go play.
You got it. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell our story and to share our cheeses. And I've learned so much about beer today. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And it's always a pleasure with you, Jessica. And, take care. Give, my love around the family. And hopefully we'll be seeing each other somewhere on the road. And again, thank you so much. You
are so welcome. Well, cheers. It's Friday afternoon.
Sorry. Cheers.
Happy
it
hour.
Is Friday afternoon. All right. All next week, Monday through Friday, I have an entire group coming through. On Tuesday, it's going to be chaos because I'll have Allison Hooper, Mary Keene, and Peggy Smith from Cowgirl. So, we're just going to hang on the seat of our pants on that one. But seems like it'll be fun. Looking forward to that. And you guys take care. And I'll see you at 4 o'clock somewhere in the month of May. Bye now.
Bye.